I never know if we're actually live yet. So I'm watching a little blue line go across the screen. Maybe we're live already. Who knows? That looks pretty good. All right. So, hey, everybody. It is Tuesday, the 16th of May, 2023. This is Gimbalabs Playground. And we were just musing before we started this live stream about how it's nice to be on the playground sometime. It's up for debate whether there are like proper safety mechanisms at this particular playground, but we can decide that later on. Yeah, we'll figure it out. But I'm really excited for this one today. A lot of good old friends here to talk about some stuff that's important to everybody. And we've been expanding the definition of developer during Plutus PBL, and kind of seeing it less as a binary, devs versus non-devs, and more as a rich continuum where all of us can learn enough to have better and better conversations about what we're building. And so I'm so excited to talk about the technology of facilitation today, if it's fair to call it that, and to see where Newman and the Facilitators Collective take us. So Newman, thanks for signing up for this one. What you got for us today?
You are welcome. Hello. I'm also excited. I love the idea of this is a technology that facilitation is a technology. It is one of those things as we expand our vision. So I'm really stoked. Thank you for making the space. I look at all the people here and I'm like, you're right. It's just like, these are our favorite people. We're out on the playground with them, and I have something to show and tell. And the other thing, that one of the models that you do a lot is like you say, I'm glad you are here. And that goes for the people here, and you mean it. You can feel it, that you really mean it, that, hey, I'm glad that you're here. And that goes for the people that are joined in on YouTube, or the people that might just stumble by on Twitter, or anywhere in the vast expanse of the future where this digital media might land, AI otherwise. I'm glad that you're here and listening to me and us as we discuss this cool thing, the Facilitators Collective from Project Catalyst. Let's see. Basically, it's a Fund 8 funded proposal led by Vanessa, Gustavo, Maria, Carmo, and Ket that encourages people to think deeply and improve their skill in facilitation. I went through it. They had a live courses last fall. I went through it. I'm the cohort 1, and it's really been rewarding to me. So personally, I want to just take the opportunity in a public forum to say thank you to Vanessa, who is here, and we can acknowledge her. She's here as one of the organizers. So thank you, Vanessa. And so, and actually, to a special recognition, and I'm trying to think, is Peter? Are you the only other cohort 1 in here? Peter was also in the course with me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was. Okay. I don't know if I'm the only one though. Let's look.
Let's look. Let's see. I know that Lucas sometimes comes, and he was there, and yeah. So this is a talk and a discussion, part of my facilitator sort of training. Like, I want to give you some context. This is a playground and sort of a show and tell. So like recess, it's important to, I'm happy to slow down here and sort of relax into this discussion. Like we already talked about, we are recording and streaming, so keep that in mind, or try to put it out of your mind like I do. Sometimes it is kind of weird to think that I'm streaming out there into the world. Okay, the time. We've also acknowledged special guests. The time. I figure that it will be about 30 minutes to an hour of sort of my structured talk. And then we'll just, I hope that good discussion will sort of ensue. With that in mind, let's see. Yep. Oh, come and talk and relax. I don't necessarily have a goal other than this, creating this nice environment for us to discuss. But I do want to tell you about the project and get some awareness of upcoming opportunities. Namely, there's an online course for facilitation that's being built by the Facilitators Collective, and that there is a community, a Discord and a community of practice that you can join if you are interested in, furthering, after you've taken this course and you want to continue to get some of the feedback and the other benefits of being in a community. But that's pretty quick. We'll be presenting, the organizers and the cohort, and we'll be presenting as we get closer to the project closeout, which will happen soon-ish, maybe in June, and the course introduction. Those things are in the upcoming months, let's say. So the first thing, oh yeah, let's, can someone post that document for folks that came in late? The first thing I want to do, and it is a facilitator sort of thing to get sort of interactive, and that's the temperature check. You can do this with your video camera. If you're not on video, you can just type into the chat. So let's go through some sort of framing questions. These are like, if you're a trained teacher, James, looking at you, you may know about the organizing questions that you give to students or learners as they sort of try to get their minds around the topics that we're talking about. And let's start with this first one. How many meetings do we go to? Do we go to too many meetings? Do we not enough meetings, or just the right amount of meetings? What do you think? You can put it in the chat, like a 5 if it's too much. Like I'm sort of in the middle to top. Yeah. Okay. Nori's got way above too many meetings. Yes, that's right. All right. What have you ever facilitated a group meeting? Routine is fine. Okay. Yeah. Session says this. Oh, session needs more. Is kind of into more meetings. Now, have you ever facilitated a group meeting yourself? I have several. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Everybody. Steve has. I know. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Now here's a question. Do you jump at the chance to facilitate meetings? Is it something that you love and are like, this is the coolest thing? I want to get to that. I'm not there. So I'm in the down low. I'm in the middle.
Depends on the topic. Like some I really like to kind of, if like a Miro board and people doing stuff there, oh, these are perfect ones. Where there is like more like onboarding and teaching how to use stuff, like can you just look at video or something? But of course we still need these interactions, and it's training for me too, because that's the real place where you get feedback. With videos you don't really get it.
That's true. I love there's a couple of great like Miro board facilitation techniques that I get scared of. Miro board bites me all the time, and I cannot make things go in Miro board when I want them to. But good things are coming. Do you feel like most meetings can be improved? Like, are you like, oh yeah, most meetings can be improved? I feel yes. I feel yes, they can be improved. Yeah, most meetings can be improved.
That's interesting that I would say that one of the groups in the Catalyst called Cut Governance Guild, because we do this feedback routine too, and I myself feel like these things progress sometimes. So it's like one of the rare places where I think that this is going like it's stable, like it's healthy, and the improvement isn't required even sometimes. Where but there is like different models too. Like one person doesn't facilitate, it kind of goes around. But where I guess you are always as a lead, then you always feel like you have to change some off. Like you cannot, if you stagnate, then you're probably already losing off. If you innovate, you can always feel like, oh, I should have done this, or like, or that there are other aspects, like, so.
For sure. Okay. Actually, I was just realizing that my screen was up. We're not seeing everybody. That made it a little more difficult not to see the. All right. So, and then here's where we can jump off. Now that you've kind of primed, okay, we're in a lot of could be improved. Is facilitation important? Is it even important? Like, who is it not important to? Like, who is it important, for, and then, the why and why not. And you can take this opportunity while you're formulating a great response to is facilitation important. You can say it's an opportunity for you right now to talk about these facilitation skills, or if you've ever thought about this with your friends and colleagues here. It's low stress, low consequence. We've got at least another hour to go. So what do you think based on those check-in questions?
I think facilitation is really important. As I've been in this collective and thinking about facilitation more, well, granularly and broadly, I'm realizing that we are each role, many times in whatever company or business or whatever, we have a role, a job description, etc. And that delineates a vector of responsibility in which we have tasks to do, or certain things. We're facilitating a service or creating or a mechanism or facilitating a mechanism that creates a product. And so we're constantly facilitating different. If we're getting paid to do something, we're facilitating something happening. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we think of facilitation as, like what you're doing, Newman, here in this room. You're facilitating. It's called like the structuring the engagement of people. Well, all jobs and roles are structuring engagement of other people, where there's a facilitation of experience happening in any role that you serve. And I don't know, that's something I've been thinking about this week. It's like maybe we think, instead of thinking in terms of roles in DAOs or something, we think in terms of the experiences we want to see created and build metrics off of that, and then assign someone to be responsible for the said experience. That would be, yeah.
I like it. I think that, once again, we've sort of expanded the idea of what facilitation is. I love facilitating, a service or structuring the engagement of people. Now that's pretty brilliant, actually. Anyone else? Some thoughts on?
I think it's a fine line to, on the one side, encourage an open discussion with the people who are involved, the participants, and being a facilitator, right? And like one of the things that kept me involved and engaged with Gimbalabs was James's ability to let somebody kind of have their lead and go with a tangent. And yet he's very graceful about pulling somebody back from really going off on a tangent. And and this is where I feel like your meeting experience is really dependent on the consciousness of the people who are participating, right? And being able to stay on point. And that's where it gets much more collaborative. But if that conscious is not there, then it really takes somebody with a lot of grace, to be a facilitator.
I'm trying to think. It's all running together to me, but who was it? Was it Vanessa? But it was like, we who are here now. Like, that's the sort of like this concept of we who are here now, like the people in this room that the consciousness and the context, being created by the folks that are there. Actually, I'm looking at session and I really want to get a musical, creative, like if an MC is a facilitator, they're facilitating a lit ass crazy event, and I really want to study or to be involved in, and then get into a playground where I could try that on as, who I am, but try that on, and just, it's like speaking a different language. Do you feel that? No? Oh, you're muted, bro.
So speaking a different language, like as an MC?
Yeah, or just like it's a different code, you know, it's like there's methods and things that you say and
yeah.
and rhythm and the sort of the history of it. But this may be tangential, but something about that, like when you're facilitating a group, there's all these different ways of doing it. There's all these different
Yeah,
ways.
there's call and response. It's like, hey, oh, engagement, getting the crowd engaged, right? Stopping like at a part of the song where you know people know and have them, you know,
Yeah.
fill in the blanks, all that. So yeah, there are ways to engage, I guess. Yeah.
There,
I
it's
think
what
freestylers go very hard on that actually, those who are able to start like rapping in a sequence and like putting a story together with a flow and then recognizing like that response and from audience.
and that's that structuring of engagement of people. Like you really are like creating a space. Like that goes to our Nori's, our space train. I want to talk about that later, but I do want to get to my goal because I've got a goal. I want to tell you about this project, y'all. And I'm going to share the screen really quick. And then I'm going to share a video. And so I should be able to do those two at the same time. Okay. So can you see that screen? I'm just going to scroll down to the project in a nutshell, because I do want to tell you about the project. I'm proud of what they did. Basically, it was this project here on, it's basically this project here on projectcatalyst.io, one of the loveliest websites ever. But the problem, no training program and no community of practice to support ongoing development of good meeting facilitation skills in Catalyst. That seems like a worthy problem. And their solution, deliver facilitation skills training via Catalyst School, building an ongoing facilitators community to champion good facilitation skills. They've pivoted a little bit. So let's go to the videotape. Well, not just yet. This is what they did in a nutshell. Devised 3 training courses for facilitating skills. They recruited 10 trainees. Peter is here from the first cohort. They delivered and documented those trainings. That was last year, the 23rd of September, the 30th and the 7th of October. So it's over 3 weeks. I think they were like 2.5 hours sessions long. One of the things, they were very humane. Like we got these little breaks and it was just right on. They did a very good job. They supported the trainees to plan and facilitate a session. And I'm going to talk about the one that I did in a little bit. Yeah, I want to talk about it in a little bit. And then, so that's this one. And then to deliver the course again, which to get like a second cohort, which they pivoted to do a self-paced online course. Well, another break. I'm closing my eyes. Everybody close. You can close your eyes if you need a break from looking at the screen. This is my computer reminding us. And then they start. Also, they are starting or have started a community of practice, and that's a Discord channel. And then the last and final one is to create this charter document, and it's gone through a little bit of pivot. Because we wanted to make it more interactive. This, like, what is good facilitation? For instance, good facilitation for a university lecture is not good facilitation for a house party or a block party with all of your friends. Good facilitation sort of, we feel, is more of an iterative and developing thing. And thus we've kind of changed it from a document that you might agree to an experience or a process that you go through. So now with all of that being said, let's roll right into this. There's a short introductory video that is 4 minutes long, but it gives kind of a good sense of what this group was about. So let's listen to it now. And let me know if you can hear. Oh, it's not going.
You technically didn't press the play button.
Oh, I didn't?
It was a replay button. No.
Oh,
Oh,
there we go.
okay, maybe it is thinking then.
It's thinking. Oh, I think I might have, because I put it into a new window, maybe. Hold on.
Just refresh it.
Hold on. Yeah, let's hit the refresh button.
Perhaps because it was in the end, maybe it's bugged out.
Community.
Project Catalyst, as a decentralized and global community, is made up of people with different languages, skill sets, mindsets, priorities, and expectations. And we all know that communication across all these differences isn't easy. Everyone in the conversation is responsible for making communication happen democratically. But how about the people who are not even in the conversation yet? In Catalyst, how can we make sure that everybody is really participating in our meetings and discussions? We're not just talking here about attending the meetings or joining the chats. It's more about being included, being respected, being considered, and being heard. We all know things may break, but let's take a look at how we can make sure that people don't. Everything starts with being respectful and thoughtful and raising your own awareness about how you take part in the communication and how you let other people take their part. There's no universal etiquette when it comes to human interaction, but there are a few things you might want to consider. It's important to acknowledge that people might feel excluded or marginalised in different ways that you may not even be fully able to understand because it's outside of your experience. Everyone, including you, can feel oppressed sometimes, or at least dislocated. And we want to make sure that this does not prevent anyone from engaging in the Catalyst community. People can face barriers because of language and levels of fluency, gender exclusion, time zone exclusion, not being a tech expert or a developer, the quality of their audio, their image or their internet connection, shyness, lack of self-esteem and other personal reasons, and being the minority in the room. Even just becoming aware of these issues is already a really cool step. And there are things you can do as an individual to diminish them. For example, showing support when you notice that a colleague is having a hard time speaking or being heard. This is quite easy. You can do it simply by showing understanding, showing appreciation for them, or inviting their contribution. You can also be aware of how you act in discussions. Do your best to speak clearly and to listen actively. We can't say it too often. Don't interrupt people when they're elaborating on their ideas. And when it's your turn to speak, don't lecture for hours every time you open the mic. You're not the only one who wants to express your opinions. So making an effort to be brief and to talk to people, not at them, will be highly appreciated by all. One trick that you can try is to note down the main topics of your contribution. This will help you to communicate more effectively. Oh, and please don't be that person who acts like no one else is as brilliant as you are. Now, a quick heads up. If you don't belong to an oppressed group, don't try to explain to that oppressed group how it feels or how they should act. Finally, be aware of conflict. Conflict is not always obvious. Just because it's not shouty, it doesn't mean the conflict isn't there. And always choose de-escalation when a debate gets heated. Try to ask good questions that don't make people feel interrogated, and check that you've understood correctly when something sounds like it's not right. So there you go. Are you ready? Let's put this into practice in our meetings and our conversations. And get in touch with us if you want to find out more. We are the Facilitators Collective, and we want to bring lovely meetings for a global, decentralized community.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Yay. Vanessa, I wonder if now might be a good time to, did I explain it correctly, or is there anything in there that you want to highlight Is there anyone from the wider group that wants to comment right off? Like, I thought that there's, yeah, like James said, so many things in there that are really, really worthwhile to go into.
I think the only thing I'd highlight is if you read the proposal, if you can be asked, you'll see it identifies quite a lot of issues. But when we actually started working on it as a proposal team, the things that came out the most strongly were facilitating for inclusion and facilitating more creatively. And it's just interesting that that's what came out, because Newman, when you were asking before, is facilitation important? For me, good facilitation makes it possible for me to participate at all. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, yeah, that's wonderful.
But I'd love to hear if anybody else has got any thoughts on, because we ummed and ahed a lot about what to make the focus of the kind of main intro video, because there was shed loads that we could have done, and that's what we did.
The one for me is the like all of the things to talk about and like what could marginalize someone, or and time zones and languages. In C4C, Dylan and the folks in Japan and Australia that would show up in the middle of the night, and they're like, yeah, I wake up super early because it was that valuable. And so if they put that much value into something, then it seems like if we can do something more to sort of appreciate them or to facilitate in such a way that it's easier.
It made me reflect on my own behavior. I'm like, do I act like, because sometimes I do act like I'm smart. I'm a smart ass. I feel like I'm the smartest in the room. Like, I felt like,
So I do think that forgiveness is like, we have to forgive ourselves for it, because it does resonate. I'm like, oh man, talking too much, doing something. Yeah. But I think if your heart is good, then there's these things that you can shift in your behavior. I don't think anyone has sort of a bad heart when that's concerned. Anybody else with stuff? Yeah. Go for it.
Yeah, just highlighting the fact that bad audio and bad video plays such a big role in the ability to listen and participate, and hence participate is really important as well. It's particularly in Catalyst, where it's such a global audience. It's very difficult to listen for a long time if it's not your mother tongue you're listening to, or it's not the best quality mic or anything like that. So really important. And I do like as well the fact that these are all skills that we just should have learned and been taught at primary school, you know what I mean? And yet, as an adult, you hear them and go, oh yeah, that's true. And that's true. It's like, I should probably go back to school for a little while and figure out some of these basic listening techniques.
No, don't go back to school. That'll beat it out of you again. We got.
Oh, true. That's right. They didn't teach me the first time. What are they going to do this?
Yeah. What do you think about that? Like the online versus face-to-face? That's what I'm thinking of. It's just like, if we were face-to-face, then maybe some of these bad habits of like the constant talking or the bad mics, yeah.
Oh yeah. I've sat through so many meetings with Africans, and I know so many of them don't say anything just because they know they can't, right? Like they know it'll get broken up, and I'm just dying to know what they would say if we were face to face. What we could draw out of their experience, and it's just not possible. So that's the frustrating part of online.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a serial texter. And so I know we're probably talking about face-to-face meeting and video interactions, but what about, when we're talking asynchronously, when we're typing to people? I feel like I'm misunderstood sometimes. And so, yeah, Anyway.
That is the big crux. That's so texting, forum posts, that is the other one, the time zone and synchronous versus asynchronous, like how to facilitate a text thread or like get people involved in community that are separated by time zone. And really then language, like people may feel like Africans or people that have aren't speaking their mother tongue, may be able to express themselves better in in writing. Yeah, for sure. I'm now thinking about this the charter. Would you, and this is sort of not in my note, but would you, well, no, I guess it is. It's the big ask. Would you create, or would it be interesting to create a document of your own thoughts around these facilitation, ideas, such that you could share it with someone else or in your community? I mean, that's sort of what we're boiling down to. And then Vanny, if I've expressed that correctly.
No, I think you have, but maybe we should give people a little bit more detail about what we were thinking about.
Yeah.
I mean, in the original proposal, we kind of had this idea of creating a sort of charter that people would, we'd go, these are the core principles of facilitation, and people would go, yeah, I agree with that. And I was not happy with it at the time, but the proposal needed to go in. But what we've come to is this idea that every community facilitates in the way that suits that community. There isn't a right or a wrong, and it's what suits you. So what we'd like to do is get communities around Catalyst to do some thinking about facilitation. This is the thing, as long as you've thought about it and as long as you've considered what works for you. And if they do some thinking, we're hoping to use consents to get people to kind of create their either a personal charter, this is how I facilitate, or this is how our community facilitates. This is twofold. I think part of the reason for it is the original group that came together to work on this proposal had a lot of experiences of feeling excluded in meetings and having no way to say, this isn't really acceptable. Whereas if somebody said, we won't exclude people, then you can go, look, you said that you would do this. And it gives you something, it gives it teeth. But it's also about making it possible for people who facilitate in a different way from what I do and what probably a lot of people here do, to go, no, actually, we don't do that. We do it this way. And then you know what you're getting into when you go to one of their meetings. So, I mean, if it's not nailed down, I'll archive it. So what we want to do is archive all these different charters that people have created for themselves or for their organization. And if you want to know how Gimbalabs facilitate, you can go and have a look and find out. And it's just a way of pluralizing, really. But in order to get there, the group has to have some kind of, or an individual has to do some thinking, but a group has to have some conversations. And I think people are familiar with how consens works, but we're going to have to twist it up a little bit. It won't quite work the way that it's designed to. So it's my fetish at the moment is tool bricolage. You take the tool and you fuck with it. And Aaron has given us his consent to do that a little bit. So there you go.
Yeah. And that's basically, we're sort of thinking at the end of these self-paced learning course, that now you've sort of steeped in all of these concepts and gone through the material. And I guess we could share some of those materials maybe. There is one that we've got to share. But once you go through all of this, then you're sort of to like integrate those things into a clear format for future reference by going through this process of creating a charter, and using the consents might help, especially in community. I mean, for yourself, you just sort of write it out, but when you're in community, you want to talk about it and facilitate discussion around it in that sort of governance way, and being able to change it in that governance way in the future, like consents, I think is actually a really good choice for that. So now that you know a little bit about that, it's basically what the Facilitators Collective can do for you. And then there's a few things. You can facilitate and improve your facilitation skills. You can improve your facilitation skills with what's on offer from the collective. You can discover your core techniques and principles. That's this charter that we're talking about. And that you can draft this charter for a documentation of your current values and principles around facilitation. I think it's a really exciting opportunity, actually, that makes like valuable datum. Like this is something that you can put on chain. This is something that is a signpost, something that says, here's how we did it. And that when you go back and look, it's like, well, that wasn't. You can always go back and change it. I keep going back to this thing about sort of being unaware of the poor. Not poor, but not effective, or I feel bad. And we talked about one of the things about Catalyst was one of the things that I've heard really well and resonated, why I stuck around, was it's like, hey, what you are going through in your experience and your voice matters, that you have something to offer. Like, because it was all about proposals, and it's like, I have this idea. We're trying to get people in and saying, hey, you have an idea. And so many places you just like, well, your idea stinks. My idea is better, and let me tell you why. But Catalyst was more like, no, we're not trying to, for instance, we would give critiques on proposals. We're like, no, it really is about saying, finding the good things in there and then trying to build them up. And getting more, again, the things that we measured, like all these Catalyst proposals. May not be that way now, but at that point, I like this idea of sort of radical inclusion and trying to bring even the bad actors, like really listening and seeing what's there and building systems that are robust. I heard someone say, it's like, look, the bad guys are going to win. This thing's already gone, and so you just have to sort of build things in the best possible way. And so that's a bit on that. Okay.
I mean, like there is that part there where people who want to say and do something different than the intention of the gathering, like, I mean, it's not that they're invalid. It's not that they're part of the community, but I mean, if the thing is about climate and somebody wants to talk about, whatever, stake pools, I mean, there are those moments. I mean, I've said, and I'm pretty sure all of us have said in them, where somebody comes in wanting to talk about a thing that is not actually why everybody gathered. So, those issues will come.
Right. We talk about this, about like creating like the good, like these principles we agree with. And if you find that you're not in agreement with those principles, like as a community, then you're like, okay, well, either I sort of try to understand them better, or leave the community. And that's not bad, like it's just there, diversity. And maybe we talked about like the cellular, like a heart cell is not a liver cell, or like these, they perform different functions, and it is a comparison. They are different. You can compare and contrast. Remember that old thing about like the fish? It's like a fish climbing a tree or something. Like if you judged yourself on tree climbing competition and you're a fish or something, it's basically like, hey, everybody has their place. It's like, let's all find our place, and then let's interop. Were we talking about interop? Everything runs together now. But like being able, the Tao of what was it? Tao diplomacy, yeah. All right, I'm getting the eye break thing. So we're moving along in time. So I do want to make sure that I've achieved my sort of goal, which is let you know about this thing called the Facilitators Collective, to let you know that it is a proposal and it's ongoing, and to let you know to look forward to the closeout reports and this new self-paced course. Likewise, to the ability, once you go through the course, to make this a charter or a documentation of your own principles around it. Does that sound about you guys? You guys familiar, or do you have questions about those things? No.
I have to say.
That was a sort of questioning guitar riff there. I'm just wondering if it was a question.
Oh, I think that was like Android.
JBL flip
Yeah.
or
Yeah,
the
that was a
JBL
JBL.
sound.
That's right. So Bluetooth connected. I'm like, what? Something?
I mean, I'd really like to get an idea just in this room, if anybody wants to wave a hand, if you'd be kind of interested in becoming part of the community we're building, and sort of, do you see yourself as a facilitator? Are you interested in it? Is it a thing that you'd like to be in touch with?
Yes.
Steve gives a thumbs up. Peter's in there.
The way I see it, I love the concept, and I think was happening before the proposal too, but we didn't really put the name on that, and people maybe just were there as facilitators and they shared these knowledges, but this proposal helped to kind of laser focus, okay, those who are interested to like materialize that information. And on that right now, I'm not sure I understood the course and like to do some documentation right after that, but I will be around, and I'm most likely you will be around. So when I see more of this happening, perhaps at some point I say, hey, I actually like also to facilitate.
Perfect. James, I see you've got your hand up. Go ahead. Oh, and you're muted, Bo.
Hey, we tell Plutus PBL students that the goal of our course is to help them become contributors, and we're trying to now start to disambiguate all the sorts of contribution there are. But one way to contribute is as a project manager who is a facilitator, right? Or as an instructor for future courses. You know, no matter what the subject area, for the next few years, there's always going to be new people onboarding to different organizations and different projects. And being able to facilitate that is going to be one of the most important skills we have. So I would be really interested in, you know, speaking of DAO diplomacy, right? Like creating just an always open opportunity that we remind people of at regular intervals to say, hey, you know, you've been working through this student experience. Want to try out some facilitation? Well, here's some support for that. And this is, to me, this is one of the most exciting things that our network is already starting to do. And if we pay attention to these opportunities to collaborate, just that sets a really compelling model, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually what I was gonna say in a different way, because I had gotten into this conversation with Mercy, I don't know, a couple of weeks before she went to Ghana this month. And then about 2 weeks ago, there's a fella who has a project, and he's got a couple of his interns taking the Plutus PBL right now. And we got into a conversation. He was calling it pre-module 100 courses, you know, in Gimbalabs. And I thought that fit neatly into what Mercy and I had started discussing before that conversation, about the fact that there's this gap between the education that WADA as an organization has been presenting, which is much more introductory into blockchain and Cardano, And then, to take somebody who's all enthusiastic out of one of those events or courses and then dump them into PBL, Plutus PBL, is a huge leap. And so there's this gap there where, and I've been trying to have an asynchronous conversation with A recently, where we're trying to talk about that, like what is that? How do you do that in a global way? And I have a hard time thinking about that, right? Because when you talk about facilitating that kind of information sharing, it necessarily depends on the historical information and general technological history of how Cardano even came to be. And that's going to be radically different from somebody from Nebraska as opposed to somebody from Zambia. Like there's you kind of have to go into that kind of pre-100 student group and say, why don't you tell us about what you understand about technology and how we even got to this point that blockchain even exists, and then you can start. But like if you've got a group of 20 people and they're from 19 countries, that could really stretch out over a long period of time before you get through all the different levels of understanding about these things. And so it takes a really flexible type of facilitator to be able to deal with these different levels of awareness, at the very beginning of what you're trying to convey.
For sure. Thank you, Steve. Curtis, you following up, or you have a new topic?
No, same, just in response to Steve. I saw you thinking too, Newman.
Yeah.
And James, correct me if I'm wrong on my perspective, but I do really like that James has allowed the freedom, or Gimbalabs is allowing the freedom of what motivates you. Why are you here? But since we have you, hey, this is how we think about things. This is how we think about governance and community. And but you're drawn, like, the motivation to want to take something like PBL. You've arrived on your own, right? There's a bit of freedom there in allowing that student to come to that conclusion. So Steve, what you're talking about, leaving one area and motivated and excited, and then trying to bridge to something like PBL, I see that as more of a decentralized effort, right? Like different groups with different mission statements or different cultures, and then they are acting as more of bridges between some of these large leap in learning curves. And they're there to facilitate and draw the attention and motivation of its own culture and the community around it. So they could sort of be those bridge in a way to connecting them to something like PBL. And then once you're at PBL, you have that degree of freedom to pursue your passion and what builds the culture, the Gimbalabs culture that we have now.
Yeah.
Thanks, Curtis. And just to throw one thing on there, like a lot of most of my life's experience is working with 14-year-olds. But I know one thing is that one of the best facilitation strategies is just to give people something to argue with, right? If you can get people riled up, well, now it's not on you to keep that conversation going because they're all pushing back against that thing you said. Or what we're really trying to do in the PPBL course is just give people something that's like a half-assed implementation of something so that we can then keep going on it together. Figure out what's wrong with it, figure out what needs to improve.
And so that's sort of the framing of I think that's a facilitation, because if you do that without like an expectation setting might be in the zone, because that's one of the beautiful things. And I've been sort of in the periphery of Gimbalabs, but then this last spring kind of jumped into PBL. And one of the beautiful things was that you set the expectation. It's like, this is about problem solving and figuring out things together. You know, that the other things are kind of, in my, what I heard with the other things were sort of in the, you know, like maybe not the exact goal, but this skill of troubleshooting and problem solving, and it really does pick up, like it aligns with what goes on in the course, like that we come to the live coding sessions with our problems, and we work through those problems, and it's really engaging, you know, to work through it that way. It's a different kind of facilitation in my mind, because typically, just one more second, typically it's like, here's the right answers on the tutorial, and then if you fall out of the tutorial, which has been my experience, and then you're just sort of like, okay, well, I'm just not good enough or whatever, and you know, my computer's not the right one or something. But here it's like, oh no, and now we go back and fix it, and yeah, it's a really good model.
I sort of feel like maybe this is the thing, is that we all sit in too many discussion meetings and we don't have enough working meetings where we do stuff practically. And it feels to me like there's lots of different ways to approach that. I mean, we did sort of think that we might sort of ask people about good or bad meetings that they've been in. One of the most like transforming ones that I had in Catalyst, where a few women got together and we did a poetry workshop. It was like in Governance Week, like a year and a half ago or something. And we brought our skills and did that. And it was just really different from your average Catalyst meeting. I'd love to see more creative stuff going on. I wonder if other people feel the same.
Yeah.
They do. I mean, you know, in the NFT community, they do a lot of that kind of thing. I mean, but it's, you know, it's kind of like whacked out kind of creative stuff that I have no way to engage personally, but I know that they're doing it, and the ones that I've sat in are pretty interesting.
Yeah, it does feel when you go into meetings and it's just discussion, and it, especially when those discussions repeat, you know, and it's just like, oh, didn't we do this? And it's just, and that's where documentation comes in. So like facilitation that can help with the documentation. And I realize that I'm probably guilty of these things, and I've made a distinct, because it hurts. Like I'm like, oh, I see it clear, like what, and I feel like it's necessary. So I'm taking it on as a challenge to figure it out, and to help other people find this. Curtis, I see that you've got your hand up. You got something for us?
Sorry to keep chiming in. I just, it was something Vanessa said I really liked about, we definitely have motivation and alignments in a lot of these meetings, and it feels really good, but then we struggle to get to the doing and taking action in some cases. Excuse me. And I've been thinking about that lately with the SIP 1694 workshops. We applied for 3 workshops with this intent, with this understanding in mind, that maybe the first one is to get alignment, getting the people in the right state of mind and passionate, motivated about, hey, we can make an impact. Then the second one sort of is modeling more of a taking action, deciding an agenda, developing a roadmap. Then the third one is participating potentially in taking action on that. I'm just curious, I guess, what the thoughts are on that type of a framework. Or do we want to try to, is it better to merge some of that action and motivation in one meeting? Do you guys see that? I'm not talking about the workshops here. I'm just saying in general, with your experiences, what type of a meeting feels more productive to you?
I'm just going to throw in the idea of doing it backwards, trying it first, and then doing reflective practice to find out what happened.
Great.
Yeah, basically, and this, I think James and the Gimbal crew would agree that it is like, you know, it's the science of it. It's like try it one way and see if it worked. The OKRs, I went to a talk on OKRs, which is like behavioral change. It's like, what behavior are you trying to change? For instance, in this one, I have kind of I want you to like our learning SLTs, student learning targets. There you go. And so but then to answer directly, I kind of like I would experiment with trying to sort of get them all together. Like if you get motivated and then do a plan, it may be too long. Like I want to get motivated and do something. Like my attention span is teeny, and time to meaningful participation is something that I look for. So like, for instance, in this course, I was like, I wanted to do the check-ins really quick. So that's just like, okay, we get people thinking, and engaged and moving and et cetera. So that's sort of a small thing, but the time to meaningful participation is something that is important, because meaningful participation is what we're all going for. And like creating my token and giving it a silly name was like fun. I did it like within an hour, and I'm like, what? I thought that would be way on down the line. I'm like, I'm like, oh, I just kind of rest after that for a moment. You know what I mean?
I was
Yeah.
trying to type it, but meaningful is too hard to type, so I'll just unmute. I think it would be really cool to report as a metric, maybe on lessons or at least assignments in a course. What is the time to meaningful results or meaningful participation in this assignment? And you could have a few, right? Like it's often worth it if you have the time to go really deep into something. That's really cool. But also to recognize not everybody has all of that time every time. And hey, look, if you can't spend 4 hours on this, here's something that will give you a little taste of it in 20 minutes, if you can spend 20 minutes.
Yeah. Nori, something new or following up?
Just something following up on the measuring stuff, and going back to your original talk about mention of Joe Edelman's redesigning societies based on meaning, is really, instead of chasing these OKRs and goals, if we can go through these exercises in these spaces to kind of identify what our values are and what they look like when they manifest, then we can use that as kind of a guide to say, are we creating these meaningful spaces that really matter to us? And I think that's a useful tool and something that can really help facilitators kind of guide people towards, like, because all those values cards that he has a thing that shows when it's manifesting, it looks like this. And that'll help like design those spaces and really drive towards the meaning that we seek, that we all agree upon, at least in the spaces that we come to. I think that could be a powerful tool. So I'd be super interested in like getting together and figuring out how do we come up with those values cards as an experiment, and seeing how they help drive our collaborative meetings. And I'd much rather measure that than some OKR or some, like, we had 15 people, we're doing great. That doesn't really tell me much.
No,
Yeah.
no. It's a different mindset, isn't it? And when the mindset sort of shifts, like, and what can you bring from, like, what can you bring from that old mindset, and what like needs to get like what kind of disrupts the new sort of thing. For instance, the measuring like the number of people as like a measure of success, but those number of people could become low engagement and not really participating, etc. But then one person that makes like a real big transformation, and it's successful. And or, like, what is success? Just for a moment, we can talk about this Edelman thing, the like the dinner party, or the guy who just writes poetry that becomes a content creator, and they're all of a sudden their metrics are different, and it's sort of washed out the soul of it. Yeah. But it seems like it's good for a moment, for like that motivation part. Yeah. I definitely want to dig into that more. Maybe in a playground coming up, we should do some, meaningful redesigning for meaning Edelman stuff.
And bring Jeremy in. He's done a lot of thinking about how to do that. He's been
Really?
posting his thoughts on the Little Fish Discord in the ideas channel. So we should definitely
Oh,
link and see if we can pull some of that together as
I'm
well.
going in there. I'm going in there. I love Jeremy with the blue eye, man. Like Jeremy
Jeremy B.
B.
I don't-
Yeah. Oh, I love that guy. He's awesome. Yeah. Vanny, you got something for us?
Yeah, I was just wondering, with the conversation sort of going towards values and stuff, I just wondered, does anybody else find that your values are not rigidly fixed? Maybe not as an individual, maybe you have certain baselines, but I think it's contextual. And I think in terms of the fact that we all wear so many hats and we're all in different different groups and all this, your values are hard to, and I think it could be problematic to pin them down and write them down on a piece of card. I mean, I don't know, it just felt like something that might be, I'd love to find a way of capturing them in a more fluid.
I was just Nori and I went to a workshop called Deepest Yes, and it was facilitated. It was super well facilitated. Lisa Frost was this lady's name, and she did this like, because values are a sticky subject, and it can be kind of ham-fisted and like kind of ill-fitting, like a cat with clothes on. It's just like, ugh, it's just dumb and whatever. I bounce right off of it. Sometimes I just bounce right off, and I'm like, yeah. But for some reason, I don't know. I didn't really learn it. Nori's like, hey, do you want to do this workshop? I was like, yeah, check it out. And I was running late and just jumped in. I had no barriers up to it. But she did this really, really well facilitated, humane. It was like, yeah, this is like, I'm connecting you as a human. And it was personal, but and in a group, but it felt like very private. And I came up with some really well defined values that still hold up 6 months later. I'm like, oh yeah, this, I do have a value of patience, for instance. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to sort of the idea of discovering my values specifically for this hat of facilitation, and then seeing in alignment what, like, because I value low stress, I plan on having low stress meetings. Because I value participation, I'm going to make sure that everyone gets acknowledged, and or do all these things. And then it gets into that science, and pardon for just a little bit longer. And then it gets into that science of like trying something out, and especially when you have a document and a review document, where you like, did it feel participatory? Like these experiments, you can look back on and see that they worked or didn't, and that's where we need to get. I mean, that's where I'd like to get, to where I don't keep repeating the same stuff, and that there is like real improvement. What are someone else has got about like, how do they feel about discovering and exploring their values around this topic, or really any topic, around facilitation? Is it sticky? Is it something that you're looking forward to?
I'm pretty interested in it right now, because what I browse through on Twitter is a lot of finger pointing. Like I woke up this morning to a tweet thread where one guy was kind of going yeah from one part of the community to another part of the community. And I like both sides, right? I like people on both sides that he was, highlighting. And I'm, so like I have a desire to see people stop doing that and just accept one another for being differently oriented, in the Cardano ecosystem. There are some people who want to do it this way, and there are some people who want to do it a completely different way. And that's okay. I mean, that was the point of open and permissionless. We can't be proactively disliking one another for being different when the whole thing was to have all these different people coming into it.
Yeah. So here's an open question. When, and maybe we're getting a little bit off topic, of course I'm doing it to myself, but when we talk about values, like when you, one, discover yours and express it, document it, and you find a conflict with someone else and you just see, or they've expressed theirs and you see that there is just a difference in value. Like once you get down to difference in value, does that help? Or how does that change the tone of the conflict or the collaboration or the cooperation? Because
I think it depends on how closely you value values, how closely you feel like they're a driving force in your life. And that has a lot to do, I think, with where you grew up and what society you're a part of, because a lot of these so-called like values, they're kind of imposed on you from like structural frameworks that are around you. So you're just cohabitating with these, and sometimes you ingrain them into your life, or you push them. There's like a push and a pull from that. So I think inevitably you have to get a little personal. So it's like, how personal do you want to get in these platforms? Like this video call, I can count how many people are there, but in the vast sea of Twitter, it's just not a good tool for it. Twitter's really good for certain things, but it's not good for other things.
thank you, Daniel. Yeah.
Yeah,
I was totally thinking this. Oh, go, John.
yeah, and that was exactly the thing I took from Vanessa's comment about context. It really does play a lot into what space you're going into, as to which values you are committing to adhere to, because you can easily go into a space that has different values, different operating models, and rile yourself up and cause contention and discord, which is, I've just described Twitter, I realized. Or you can go in, and I think that comes back to the very beginning of the conversation as well, is about, do you define some kind of charter, some kind of code of conduct going into a space? Like, you come into Gimbalabs, this is how we operate, this is the sort of values we hold to, this is how we'll get stuff done, and everyone will leave feeling warm and cozy. Or are you going into a combative space, and this is where actually we need to figure out some hardcore stuff like stake pool operation parameters. It's a very different, to get a result, you have a very different input. So what values you take in does change, like Vanessa was saying. So I think that's important, knowing going in what the expected values are and whether you're happy to participate in that group or not. And that doesn't negate in the fact that we are all trying to muddle along together and create some kind of decentralized community that functions in some way, shape, or form. But there is so much opportunity for contention that actually you need some kind of definition of a space you're going into to be able to make it, to make ground in that space, regardless of where it is.
Yeah. And then there's that piece about when they change. Like, are values the ones that change kind of more frequently, or values are the same and then the other thing changes?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's very much about a lot of these spaces you're going to learn, aren't you? Me 2 years ago in a meeting had very different values on half the things I'm talking about, because I had no idea what I was talking about. But now I've matured, I've got a whole lot more learning. I've listened to a whole lot of people speak on these who have thought about it a lot longer than I have, and so your values morph and change and grow up and develop and mature.
And get like more like, no, or like assertive, or like, no, I have the experience and now I know this is my preference, or this is my opinion, or this is my value. That's kind of like it, as you get like a mature plant grows, it gets a little more rigid, right? More solid.
Yeah.
Is that
And a lot of the problem with us is that we point fingers and get annoyed at people who change their values or are perceived as having changed their values, just like politicians. You know, they refuse to change their values because they know it's shooting themselves in the face half the
right?
time.
Right.
Until it suits them, until the election's over, and then it's like, okay, I can say what I want now. I can reset. And but actually, no, we need to be able to have discussion and argue one point of a corner, and then come back the next day and say, actually, no, I want to argue this from the other angle. So yeah, being amorphous. I mean, yeah, it all boils down to whether it's something functional and practical, or whether it's something moral or ethical. You know, obviously these are different on a personal level compared to a societal level, but yeah,
it's governance. It's governance. Vanny, go ahead.
I'm just thinking there might be something here with values about what kind of space we're talking about. If you come to a little group in Catalyst and you find that there they have values to deliberately exclude you, you can just go, yeah, okay, get on with it. I'll go somewhere else. If it's the actual whole of Catalyst, that would be a different thing. And if it was the whole of Cardano, that would be a different thing again. So I think you value, you know, where there's a threshold where maybe you've got to stand up and just go, yeah, I know those are your values, but I've got different ones. I don't know. Yeah, there are certain things that make you stand up.
Yeah. Oh, there's hands up. Go, Nori.
Oh,
Nori.
but what I
Go on.
actually forgot to say, I'm really sorry to interrupt you, Nori, but yeah, I was just going to say that one of the things for me is the explicitness of what people's values are. If people are pretending not to have a value that damages or excludes somebody else, then yeah, I really think they should be honest about it.
Beautiful.
When I think about values, I think, yeah, we all have our own individual values, but it's the group values, the ones that we say we're going to do this together, that are more interesting. And how do you get to those values? Just looking, I'm going to share my screen really quick. And move some stuff out of the way. This is from Joe Edelman's Notion site, and he has some values cards that he did put up as examples, but there are things like spacious moments, what I look for, social interactions where both players have time to find the deepest thing they want to share or the boldest action to take together, friends who jump at that possibility, and meetings that afford those interactions. And the way to live is openly, lovingly, boldly, patiently. So these are like expressing these values that I don't know if they change over time, because they go pretty deep to kind of this fundamental, like, how do we generate meaning? It's not like, how do I, you know, it's all about that, or like deep hope, what I look for, possibilities I see when I believe in people and human nature without confidence in any particular solution, fix, or ideology. You want to be around people who see these possibilities too, and strategic visions that take those possibilities into account. And the way to live is hopefully, patiently, lovingly. And these are set out as kind of, this is what we believe. And if you like this, come join our space, is kind of how these are set out. And it also gives us a way to measure it. Like, when we show up, are we showing up grounded and self-caring, or are we showing up as patient, curious, and connected? And you can kind of facilitate, getting back to the facilitation bits, to kind of nurture those kind of things. And they may be something that might be really interesting just to see if we can come up with, and then experiment with if they are useful. Like, this is all, I love Joe's stuff and it resonates very deeply, but I have no experiential proof that it's good. So I would love to try it out.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah.
I that, thank you for that, the screen share. That reminded me of using, like, to describe what I'm thinking about, using the words from a book I'm reading. Values are like axions, and the meeting or the environment is the theorem. And then we utilize that to look for certain aspects. So like in that example, it was, you were trying to curate an environment to create meaning. So if this environment is to create community, then the theorems that we're using and the axioms that we're using as like the values that we're talking about should be different. They should respond to what we're actually going forward, because we can get lost in the sea of values. Like I value this, I value that, I value this. Like if you come to a meeting and we're talking about, for example, loyalty, at what point does loyalty decay? At what point should you, that value of loyalty, is that not useful? And then we can talk about something like, when is the PBS system good for you and when is it not? Because as we've earlier pointed out, that's actually a plus, not a negative. Like you should be able to outgrow your training wheels.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah,
Daniel.
thank you for that, for sure.
Yeah, I want to thank Nori for that Notion link. It's something, you know, we about the same time. Well, before I got into Cardano, my partner got involved with the local nonprofits, and this tiny town has just an unbelievable number of nonprofits, and they're, you know, that was like 7 years ago, and you know what I've noticed since I've been in Cardano is the parallels between what happens in the Cardano ecosystem and what happens in this, you know, ridiculously small little town, where you have these people drawn to an area, right? That's geographically and climate wise and environmentally wise. It feels good to this huge spectrum of people. And the new people that come in, right? Particularly when COVID hit, there were all these people with cash coming from the big cities around and buying property and wanting to be involved, wanting to be engaged and wanting to contribute. And, you know, like Vanessa pointed out in the chat, you know, they come in like with this attitude that, hey, you guys should do this because this is what works in Birmingham. You know, it's like, well, this is not Birmingham, right? You know, and that's not a satisfactory answer for them because they know how to get things done. And, you know, on the other side, you have people who've lived here for years who went through their own process of being new in the community and coming in with what they thought were bright ideas. And, you know, problems ensue, and you realize there needs to be different approaches. Otherwise, these patterns that have been repeating for 40 years are going to continue to repeat. And, you know, and that's kind of where we are right now, right? There's a schism going on, and it's basically a schism between new people and people who understand the reality of what it's like to actually organize events and generate community consensus. You know, it's problematic, right? Because the natives, they don't care what the new people think, right? And I see these parallels in the Cardano community too. You know, it's tricky, and a lot of it comes down to how we think inside of our heads, which affects how we verbalize externally to others. In that, you know, I'm looking for something X, Y, or Z, and you know, resisting the urge to say, well, you know, you should fucking study decentralization, buddy. You know, you know, it's not, you can't really get very far with that because people think they came here because of decentralization and that they have not weeded out the roots of centralized thinking in their heads. And so it's a tug of war that, I don't know, it feels very human to me. I can't tell that it's really been that different throughout human history, but maybe one day it might.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah. Yeah, there is something in there. Mix, something new or following on? Maybe not.
Sorry. No. I don't know. Have you guys talked about the risk of finding new value and reinventing people or themselves. And by the risk, I mean the cost, and the cost, I mean the really catastrophic cost. Not just, okay, you might face something. By the risk, sometimes people think that, okay, I might lose some value, but I will find something. But I mean, maybe you face that some of the very common value, like value of friendship. And if you try to put that or give that or try to teach that value to an autistic kid or a person who is introvert, or the person who mentality doesn't want or doesn't like this friendship, although he knows it or she knows it. But if he goes or if she goes with that value, it will be really a life-threatening risk to that person. And in other case, for example, especially with people like with the higher age, when they stick to a value for a long time, although that value is hollow, it's shallow, like there is nothing, the risk of changing that value may be sometimes suicide for that person, because that person suddenly lost his ruler, suddenly lost his something that we may think that, yeah, it really that person defined himself by this value. But yeah, you know, because for each people, I believe, I mean, I don't know, again, I'm bringing up something new, but maybe you guys discuss it as well. The proof of work of each person to find value is really different. Like for each person is quite different. Like if I go for something deep and I want to find value in friendship, like very common, like common sense value, for me, maybe it would be much more costly than you or anyone else. And in this process, I'm reading or learning about the finding value, reinventing. They're not that much focusing on the cost of these things, like the cost of finding new values, the cost of reinventing yourself, and the risk of these things. So I wonder your guys' opinion about the cost, the risk of reinventing and finding new value. And again, these risks are not something very minor, but something major.
Oh,
I
holy
so
crap.
identify with that.
Wow. Wow. Yes. Yes. That's
I-
incredible, man. Thank you, Mix. That's exactly
So-
it. Yeah. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, I just, you know, my dad started preaching when I was a teenager, right? And his father was a preacher also, right? And so when my dad got into it, he had been taught the Bible a different way. And so he was all excited once he felt like he understood it well enough to share it with his father. And so, you know, he goes through a thing with my grandfather, and my grandfather just sat there and told him, you know, my dad was young. My dad was really young. I mean, you know, when he had me, you know, so like he was like maybe late 30s when this conversation happened. And he didn't have a response, because my grandfather's response was, Jerry, if I believe what you're saying, and I see why you're saying what you're saying, but if I believed what you're saying, I'd have to say that the last 50 years of my life was a waste. So I'm not gonna,
Exactly.
you
Yeah,
know,
exactly.
and it was like, I mean, come on. But it, you know, it's like, you know, I posted this thing in one of the brain dump channels, you know, this quote from Scott Mendelker, you know, where he's like, how much do you love truth? You know, do you really love truth? Are you willing to change because of truth? And that was a real eye-opening moment for my dad, you know, about his dad, you know, and I've had the same moment with him, with my dad, you know. It's like there are some things my dad won't let go of in spite of decades of recent history proving the opposite of what he wants to believe about the United States and liberty and all that shit. And it's funny what people will hold on to in spite of new or ever-present evidence.
Man. Wow, we got into the thing. I mean, holy cow. Curtis, Daniel, I see your hands are up. Go ahead.
mix. I love how you have the capability to really inspire and draw out some of the big questions. My perspective, I don't think I can encapsulate the whole scope of what you were bringing to the table, but I have been kind of thinking about it lately and interested in that concept. You know, we have a core that I feel like most of us as individuals, it doesn't change very often. Our core selves tends to stay fairly static and evolves over time, but very slowly. And then the way I define values in this context is how that core is represented. And we spend our entire lives figuring out what those values are, so they constantly change. But when we find a community or a group that has a value and that aligns with our representation of values, and we see value in those values, then we're attracted towards that. But it allows the flexibility of you to discover your own values. They can stay dynamic. They can change as long as you still value the core concept of that community or that group. So how could we design systems that take that into consideration, that we do change as humans? We're constantly figuring out what our values are. So the cost of that is life, is experience. But how can we draw that value into a group or into a community?
Yeah. Yep. I think not letting the values ossify and to sort of, to keep that suppleness, and or when they come crashing down, that's an epic battle that Steve, talked about his dad and grandfather. Daniel and Peter, I do have to mention that I'm sort of getting towards the end. So let's sort of think in terms of like closing up comments and such.
Yeah, this won't open up. This might actually focus us. I have an idea that might help us paradigm shift. So when a person goes through that hollow value that shatters them if they let go, or that feeling of letting go, they're experiencing a paradigm shift. So we usually have a couple in our lives, some people more than others, but like things like going from being a child to being an adult, things like that. They can be slow, they can be progressive, kind of fast. How much of how many shifts in perspective on how strong do we want people to go through? Because if we're gonna create go towards a decentralized society, a lot of us have to give up control.
That's right. That's it. I mean, I think that's it. The shift from to a decentralized society is going to require a paradigm shift, and it's going to end up exposing all these kind of weird, hollow values. Right on. Yeah, that's exactly right. And then having a facilitator that can bring people in these decentralized communities that can kind of somehow navigate that tidewater where there's this constant change and real danger. I mean, real personal danger. Like things may break, but do humans have to? Did I share that quote? Did you guys hear that one? That was in the introduction. And it's just really, I think we got down to it. So I appreciate it. Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking, like, at the beginning, you guys were talking about pipes, funnels, and spaces, and I haven't heard these concepts recently. Evidently, this is something you guys have stumbled on and are talking about. So I was wondering if someone could provide some definitions for that frame and tie it into what kind of the direction this conversation has gone.
Well, Nori, I know is already, I can see typing fingers to bring in the chat. But in the context of this is basically it's a Joe Edelman, who sort of describes the way the web and internet things are working in this funnel, like a sales funnel, like it sort of gets people and sort of focuses them or filters them out. a tube as something that moves people from one thing to another. Like I think he calls it like, what's this example of the tube is like the sales process. It's like once you've made the decision to buy, then you're in a tube. You just go from one to another place to another. And then these spaces, which are sort of some like a collection of, or where like a creativity or like unstructured things happen, and that like a space is kind of like a system, and that like a lot of the way things have worked now, it's more like a collection. He calls it a collection of strangers, or like a just a collection of parts, not in a systematic way. No real bonds connecting other than I'm here for this thing. I don't know if that really explains it all super well, but I guess what, and then how it connects to facilitator is that you need to facilitate a funnel. You need to facilitate a tube. They're different like contexts for facilitation. And what I was saying is that I would like to facilitate a space and where like creative things can happen. And it's much more like, there's not a real goal in this kind of quantitative way. It's not a quantitative goal. It's a more qualitative, more natural, longer term kind of goal. But yeah, I would definitely encourage, and here comes Nari, he's got.
Yeah, just at a high level, tubes are things that move people from place to place. Like it could be the Gimbalabs website that like moves people to the right. Like you want to go to Playground, you want to go to the PBL. Those are all tubes that funnel people to different places. Usually to a space where they can hang out, participate, ideally increase value and meaning. Funnels are ones that drive a crowd down to a single point. Like in Amazon, it would be like a checkout. Eventually you go to your shopping cart, and that's your funnel that takes you to the point of purchase after all of this activity and tubes of trying to find the thing you want to buy. And in communities, it's kind of like, I'm not sure what the funnels here are, but it could be like Fund 10 is a big funnel for Catalyst that kind of drives all of us to that thing where we interact and do stuff in the space of Fund 10. But yeah, sorry, Steve, I kind of cut you off.
No, I just wanted to add that, I feel like Playground is kind of like an off-ramp, right? Like you can come to Gimbalabs and yeah, you can do PBL, or you could do, whatever dandelion, but like if you come to Playground, you might actually find out who you should really be with. I mean, we've helped, like we helped Session put together a group, because this was where he first talked about DMU. Yeah.
Mix.
I just wanted to first thanks all of you for your wonderful comments, Curtis. Yeah, I have some a skill to pinpoint this pain point of the people or the topics and bring it up. But one thing that I found, maybe it is a possible solution for this very risky value, which you guys kind of mentioned, is instead of changing this value or reinventing this value into one session or even several sessions, we can maybe go with, because of this decentralization, because of this group, because of all the community we have, people might change slowly their value by fraction. So instead of changing value, maybe we can look to this value as a fraction of values. So although those people do not get the whole value in their life and do not apply it, but even that tiny bit of fraction of that whole value will start a kind of butterfly effect. And slowly, by some time, who knows? I don't know, maybe some years, sometime, they find themselves that, hey, I've changed and I have full or total value of this thing, and I didn't break, and I didn't need to, I don't know, some drastic change, doing some drastic change in my life. So I can co-op with this value. maybe decentralization actually is the only way, because you see in our world right now, especially about religion, especially about politics, ideology, people do not talk, and when they are talking, they are trying to somehow fighting each other, or killing. It's like a battleground. It's like just a wrestling. It's not even talking. And the idea, I think, is because of centralization of those values. Because if the person lose that value, that centralized, and that thing, maybe it's not the place, but it's some entity, something that is but it is centralized in those people, especially guys, humans love kinship. It's or it is in our DNA that we need to have to be part of a group or something to survive. So somehow we create these centralized entities, and we kind of feel that I am a representative of that centralized entity. I have to fail. I can lose my value, no problem. I will sacrifice myself for this centralized entity. But once we have decentralized, I don't think we will see this thing in future. And I think people slowly, by going through these pipes, channels, get this fraction of value and change. And I think actually politicians, they use this, like throughout years, they change people's public opinion in their use. So it's kind of abusing this phenomenon. But I think decentralization can use this phenomenon to really helping people to change, but not breaking them and not even bending them. It's like co-oping. It's like because human, as you guys know, human, especially or a species, is one of the most sophisticated species that can co-op with the environment very fast. Like the people that are living in desert, they're living in the North Pole, they are living in jungle, and all of them are human. Their stomach, I don't know, their food, everything get kind of co-op. I mean, they coexist with that. So I think the idea of decentralization, because it is centralized, because there is no this I don't know, some kind of unknown, invisible entity, centralized thing that we have to protect that, even with the cost of ourselves. Eventually, people can have the mutual understanding for values, although those values are not in their life, not in their environment, not in their self, and so on. But still, they can understand it. But yeah, thank you guys for all your lovely comments.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Holy cannoli. Like I went to a fight and a hockey game broke out. Geez. Well, we created a space, and this I'm very, very grateful for all this. Lots of great resources were shared. Is there any closing up thoughts?
To your facilitation, Newman. Thanks. Thanks.
Yeah, that's it, really. That's
robbed
all I
me.
say. It's nicely done.
Thank you. Thank you, Newman. Thank you, everyone.
You're welcome.
Hey, for the record, value also means something technical and specific on the blockchain. And last time we did tokenomics, we started to build that bridge from these kinds of values conversations to that kind of value. And eventually it's going to be could be a starting place to get us into some of that. And I just noticed my internet went out a little bit, so sorry if I lost you.
Oh, it sounded fantastic. However, there's a bridge between value on the chain and this values on the thing, like building that connector, and that where like creative coding and building on the chain and finding a bunch of diverse coders building things together and making those really diverse groups, like all the folks here. It's really, really wonderful. Really, really wonderful. All those different perspectives, great things are on the way. And we need good facilitators. So come and join us at the finish up with Gimbalabs. Come and see us at the Facilitators Collective, and it's a bright future for us.
To be continued for sure.
Yep.
Thanks again, Newman. Thanks everybody for generously sharing today. Good stuff. And if you're catching this video later, every Tuesday, 1800 UTC, details, gimbalabs.com/calendar. See you soon.
Mhm.